Okay, this is the inside of my garage here. I built it after I sold a road racer that I had restored, and the car is racing now in California. But I'm going to go real quick through the cars that I've built, restored, modified, or whatever, and just a quick overview of everything. This is a mid-80s midget with a Pinto motor in it, a 2-liter motor. And this car, I restored it, had been sitting for years, probably 20 years, and I've raced it quite a bit. This is a replica of a 61 GTO Ferrari that I've just finished within the last 2 months. And it's fiberglass, it's based on a 280Z. The only thing that's the 280Z is the cowl, the roof, and the back hatch. Everything else is glass. I put it on, I've got the molds, I built the panels that go on the car. I had a friend of mine build me the molds, but this car's got a 350 Chevy engine in it with a T10. Really like it, neat. This car we built from scratch, and when I use the word we, Joe, a guy that works with me, him and I built these cars. And this one, there was nothing. We built the frame, put a Chevrolet 6-cylinder in it. I built it for my wife to race in Amelia Island. And I painted it gold because it was her and I's 50th wedding anniversary, and her and I race sprint cars. This is my Model 8. I built it about, 10 years ago. Put a 350 with an automatic in it, and chopped the top 2 inches. And I drive it as a daily driver. I mean, this thing runs great. And here's a 56 Thunderbird that came out of Long Island, New York, and we restored it. It was a real turd. We restored it about 10, 12 years ago, and I still race it. It's got a 406 Ford motor with tri-power reverse valve body C6 with a quick change rear end in it. And this car was a gasser, a racer from 61 to 68. The next car is my sprint car. This car is a 1957 model that we completely restored. I raced it for years, and it's got a 302 Chevy engine in it, and with an in and out box. I've raced this one once in Indianapolis, and I allowed my wife to outrun me with her car. She's raced this twice at Indianapolis Speedway. I outrun her the second year with another car. This has an Alfa Romeo engine in it with Weber carburetors. We put an Alfa transmission in it also. And then over here is a 1957 sprint car that a guy out of Clearwater, Florida, Harry Campbell, he was the premier sprint car builder in this area, Central Florida, for years. And Harry's been going a long time, but this was one of the last ones that he built. I think it was the next to the last car. This car is a car that I race on dirt now when I race, and we completely restored it. It was sitting under a tree, and it was totally green, and the only thing that was left was the frame, the hood, and the tail. So the frame including the roll cage. So we put it all back together. Runs great, nice car. This is a car that Joe and I built from scratch. We sit around one day, I said, Joe, why don't we build a front engine dragster? He said, that sounds like a good idea. So we started at 0, built the car, pulled the motor out of another sprint car that I had. It's an injected 360. We put a power glide behind it, and I've never raced a car. We cranked it up, got it running, and that's all we've ever done with it. I love Chevy engines. I'm a Ford guy, but it's hard to beat a 350. But I get tired of seeing them in cars, so I ground Moroso off of here and put a Avante, because when we started this car, I had an Avante that I've sold since. So we made it a Studebaker theme. Next to it is what's called a Sebring. There were cars that were made in the mid-'80s, and you could get them with a 350 Chevy or a 302. This car has got a 302 engine in it, and with an automatic. I love the car. It's a replica of an Austin Healey. They made it a little wider and a little longer. Very nice driving car. This is a 1947 sprint car that a friend of mine, his daddy and him built one each. And he raced it up until about 5 years ago. I got the car, and I told Neil when I got it that I was going to put an automatic transmission to drive it on the street. So we put headlights, taillights, and an automatic transmission, a turbo 350, bolted to a 302 GMC 6-cylinder motor. I've raced this once at Indianapolis. And this is another car that we just finished right before the Ferrari. This is a 1957 Thunderbird that was totally rotted out. I rebuilt the whole car, and I put a Cadillac 500 cubic inch motor in it, put the Jaguar independent rear suspension, and I made the interior look like a Corvette interior. And then I also cut in the side here the vents that would make it look like a 61 or 63, 64 Corvette. It's just something different. And then if you come out here is a 1936 Chevrolet Coupe that was a modified that was driven by a guy named Will Cagle, and it was a real turd, probably the worst car that we've ever restored. We put it all together, and we're still working on it. We'll go back over on the other side of the garage, and I'll show you a couple NASCARs that we've restored. And this is the first one. This is a 1972 Monte Carlo that was originally driven by Jack Ingram, and Jack was moved on, and Donnie Allison drove it, and David Pearson drove it. It won Talladega once and Daytona twice, and it was a late model Sportsman. Car runs great. I had it, they asked me to put it in the Hall of Fame at NASCAR, so it was in the Hall of Fame for a year. The next car is a 86 Impala, or not Impala, Monte Carlo that Neil Bonnet was the last person to drive it, and it was owned by Junior Johnson, and it was the last year that he owned cars. And this is an Aero Coupe. It's got the fastback window. The car was also driven, I'm told, by Terry Labonte and Darrell Waltrip. And then they handed it down to Neil Bonnet. Car runs good. I've raced it at Darlington. I've raced it at Rockingham. And any chance I get, I race it. If you look across the garage, one thing that I get a lot of questions about is what kind of front end that is up there on the mezzanine, lack of a better term. And I don't know what it was on. I bought it as you see it. It's got 32 Ford fenders. It's got an Imperial headlights. It's got a 50 Ford hood on it, and it tilted. And I bought it at a swap meet just because, and it's all metal, just because it looked neat and the amount of work that went in there. The guy that built that had to spend, if he worked on it 40 hours a week, he had to spend 3 weeks on it minimum. I mean, all kinds of work involved that. That's a tail. I junk out cars and get parts off of. That's a tail off of a Opel that they put a whale tail on it. And then if you look right down below it is a gas tank off a motorcycle. We got the chopper frame around here someplace. I don't know where it's at. Oh, it's right over here. Here you see the deal. That was the frame off of the, that was on. It was a chopper from the 70s, I think. So that's some of the stuff here in the garage. My garage is 40 foot by 80 foot. I paint cars here. All these cars, with the exception of the Austin Healey, we've restored or built or basically done everything to them. And very proud of my collection. I've sold about 6 or 7 cars out of it over the last couple of years, but I continue to build cars. Joe and I, since '03, and people find this hard to believe, but we built or restored 29 cars since '03. So it can be done. I just spend my whole life here. My wife said, you need to move in over there, and I agree with her, but she won't let me. So this is my garage. Okay, this is some pictures that have been taken over the years of my wife and I racing and different stuff. But a quick story about this. In '09, I won the points championship, and in '10, I had a heart attack. So they stopped me from racing for about 8 weeks. Well, my wife, who is very competitive, I said, I'm going back to racing the next race. She said, no, lay out one more race. I agreed to it, and we finished talking, and she said, you don't get it, do you? I said, no. She says, if you stay out of this race, I win the points championship. So I raced another class. She won the points championship in 2010, and she won the points championship in 2011. I came in second in 10 and third in 11. So she is very competitive. You have to know my wife. This is me racing at Amelia Island in the 1947 sprint car. And this is the next year. She didn't race this year. She had hurt her back. The next year, her and I racing, and this is the car that I had built her over there. Up here, this is her first. I bought a midget that was pretty much restored for her to drive. It was a mid-40s car, and she drove it, and dang it. The next year, I bought her a sprint car, and we restored it, and I was number 80, she was 81, but she didn't like the color on this, so I repainted it like this. And this is my wife and her car. I repainted it, and when I painted it, I changed the number from 81 to 60 because that's how old my wife was. Well, we were in Orlando at this race, and they took pictures of her. And after the race, she said, I want my car repainted again. So I repainted it, and I changed the number to 63. So about 3 years later, she says, I want it repainted again. I said, well, I'm changing the number. She said, leave it alone. It's okay. Because at that time, she was 67. So the car is painted like this now with 63 on it. She's quite competitive. This is the 12 car. I raced it at Rockingham, and I was probably the last NASCAR stock car to race at Rockingham. From what I understand it, they're tearing it down now. This is my AMX that I used to race, road race, and this is at Sebring. And up here is a picture of Janice and I at Orlando. And it's really hard to tell who's ahead. I think she is, but I'd never tell her that. So that's some of the pictures of the cars and things that we do.